Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with Us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, we have a prompt from longtime friend of the show, Lord of All Chris's, with his newest prompt. I've always been a fan of anthropomorphic animals, thanks in part to Disney's Robin Hood and Jungle Book. While things like Redwall, Mouse Guard, and the board game Root have cutesy angle by having protagonists be small mammals, I'm interested in a bug-based world. I'd love to see you guys do a world that was based on insects and land-based arthropods. The obvious choice is ants because they are social creatures, but I'd like to see a world where insects of various species have a reason to work together. I don't know what kind of setting, sci-fi, low fantasy, modern day, would be the most interesting, but I would like to see the world where insects are among the smallest things in the world. The setting having unfathomable alien giants in it is part of the draw to me. If you take this one, I 100% expect aphids to play some type of important role. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's the aphid meme is part of our branding at this point, so I'm totally okay with that. We've got tenets though before we get in there. Tenet 1, aphids must play a large role in the setting. Part 2, the protagonists are among the smallest things in the world. And part 3, the bugs do not understand that humans have a culture of their own, which is actually 2 tenets. Because the second part of that implies the existence of humans at all, which I'm just tossing out there. You kind of squeezed in 4, but hey, that's a Rob special. That's how I get 6 tenets per episode. But before we get into this bug world, which I'm very excited to see the place that we take it, I have to remind everyone that if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, click on the link, and we will build your prompt within a reasonable amount of time. If you want to follow us on social media, we're over on Twitter at Let's World Build. If you want to come join our Discord and talk bugs or world building in general, you can follow a link in the description for that. And if you're feeling particularly generous or you just want those sweet, sweet patron-only episodes, you can follow a link in the description and give us money over on Patreon. Now, with the shilling out of the way, we've got our own tenets to get to. So let's start us off. Courtney, what is the first tenet that you wanted to start us off with today?
So, as our patron established, humans are definitely part of the world. And one of my favorite games growing up was Sim Ant, which is, if you haven't played it, you should go look it up. But it's a Maxis game from the early 90s where you play as an ant. You're trying to get your colony to not just survive and grow, but also fight off the enemy ant colony and eventually overtake the human house of the property you're on. The guy who owned the house was very much this awful colossus kind of figure who you'd have to watch out for when you mowed his lawn or sprayed bug spray and stuff. So I wanted to make sure that our setting has that sort of vibe where humans aren't just giants that occasionally wander through your forest, but they inhabit the same space that you inhabit and can be this sort of looming threat or looming benevolent force if they're dropping crumbs everywhere for you to pick up.
I want to cut in and tell you how horrifying the giant spiders were in Sim
Oh my
Ant.
God, yes. I forgot how dark that game was. I was looking at some videos of it. When you get killed by a spider, I wrote this down, this text box pops up
please.
That says, you writhe in burning agony as the spider's deadly venom flows through your body.
Nice.
It's fucking brutal for a game that's meant for 10-year-olds.
It tells you that it liquefies your inside. I swear to you, that's part of what happens.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
Yeah, that game is incredibly dark and definitely part of my childhood, which I very much appreciate.
Yeah, it's so good.
I had to shout out the giant horrifying spider because we got to over here.
Yeah.
So I like the idea that there's cohabitation. I appreciate that deeply because I think that obviously speaks true to the tenet that humans exist, and I like the idea that they're just kind of bumbling colossi that are either incredibly terrifying or oh boy, we can kind of manipulate them based on what the actions of the bug world are.
Yeah, I basically wanted it to we're focusing on an area that's it is a city or a town or even a specific household, something to that effect, so we get that interaction going on.
I see.
Well, there's a sense of a lack of awareness that these other entities, these humans, have of the ants, or at least a disinterest, it seems, based on what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're getting into Lovecraft territory. Daniel, please don't tell me that one of your tenets is something along the lines of using the insects as an analogy for humans in the world compared to the ancient aliens, right?
Are you saying that you would like me to give you a tenet?
I would love to hear your tenet, Daniel. Absolutely.
I was going to, yes, use them as metaphors to some extent. I was thinking, because I guess like the literal idea that they are ants and the literal idea that there are humans and that's the setting kind of is boring to me. So I was thinking the bug people exist on a lower dimensional plane of existence than the humans. So if the bug people are 3-dimensional, perhaps the humans, whatever they are higher dimensional. And so the impression that we have that they're enormous is really that they move through space in a different way. And so they seem like they're everywhere, when in fact they're just higher dimensional.
Interesting.
A very classic Daniel trope, higher dimensional beings,
Yeah.
I can support that. I think that might kind of go with one of my tenets that I have coming up, but I don't think I'll stop there. Courtney, what do you have to say about interdimensional human monsters?
It's an interesting idea. Yeah, I'm wondering if like maybe this is some kind of sci-fi setting then, like if humans have technology that's allowing them to travel in this way, or if it's a magical thing that lets them jump around between space and time.
Interesting.
You could see that going either way.
Yeah.
Well, let me help with that, because I think that this was supposed to be tenet number 2 for me, but I think I'm just going to get it out there now because I think it fits so well. I had the idea that while the insect world is kind of thriving in a burgeoning civilization, the world of the humans is actually experiencing a post-apocalypse of some kind. And if we can focus on the idea that maybe the humans didn't necessarily mean or want to be 4th dimensional, and that's kind of why they flicker in and out of existence, and that plays somehow into the greater post-apocalypse angle. I think that'd be kind of a fun way that we can kind of make this all fit together.
I love that.
That's cool. Yeah, that is very cool.
Because then it makes them not necessarily these ominous evil things, but there's reasons why they are the way they are, and it's a matter of the perception we have of them.
Exactly. And then the bugs, of course, they have no understanding of the culture or the reason. So to the bugs, they are like, in some senses, like these unknowable creatures, but they are still forces of, like nature that might also represent something existential, but still, like they exist and they're a major force in the world.
Yeah. And it ties into with the idea of like, cockroaches are going to survive a nuclear war, that sort of thing.
There's a sense, and what I want to make sure we don't lose is that sense of vastness that he has, which I think we're doing, right? Like, because I think we can, if the reason why I said make them higher dimensional, meaning another physical dimension, is because if something operates that way, like it has more space to move. So for example, it can take an L-shaped turn, if that's a higher dimensional move, and then move 500 miles, as opposed to us, which are limited by 3 dimensions of space. So I think that's why we can still have them be like regular sort of people that we're familiar with, but they've undergone some kind of horrible accident or post-apocalypse, like you're saying. Exactly. But from the perspective of the bugs, like they're really alien.
Yeah.
Right. And from the perspective of the insects, they're looking at the humans as these monstrous, massive things that move in these strange, unknowable ways. And they're like, what is happening? We cannot know. We cannot understand. Because I also think that the way that I have it canonically in my head is that whatever triggered the humans post-apocalypse is also what triggered the insects' kind of sentient awakening.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
This isn't one of my tenets, but I would be interested potentially in going in the direction of like a post-climate collapse kind of future, and the bugs are sort of regrowing nature, essentially, like put a more positive spin on
I like that.
The idea of like a post-apocalyptic thing.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny you mentioned that, because I feel like we've been really on the grimdark train for our last couple of settings. And this is not an official tenet from me, but rather just a plea from my depression-riddled soul, which is if we could be a little bit more positive with this type of series.
No,
I have the human post-apocalypse, but that's why I made the distinction between the bugs. This is like
you
burgeoning.
Right.
Exactly.
And I noticed that too. Like that's their reality, but the bugs could be this wonderful, thriving civilization. Like
exactly.
Right.
And because they're our focal point, that makes it so the setting and the themes can be more hopeful than the dying of the human species. It's more like the rise of a new civilization and species.
No, I'm all for that.
I mean, there could be a sense of forlornness too, you know, like of the humans too, that we will learn about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we can do already with this, and I'm really getting excited for it. I've also got some potential genres. I'm going to bite my tongue until I think it's like the perfect time. So why don't we go for our second rounds of tenets here? And Courtney, you start us off. So Daniel, why don't you hit us with your second tenet?
My second tenet is very simple because I was also thinking, like Courtney, about games I played when I was a child that had animals in some way that were really exciting. And my favorite one that I would literally play with my friend Jennifer until our fingers couldn't move anymore and one of us would lose was Star Fox.
Boy.
So I would love to have bug people in Starfighters in some way.
Daniel, I'm jumping in because okay. I didn't have starfighters in mind, but
they don't have to be spaceships, but something like starfighters.
Would you be okay with something like a 1920s prop plane, like the Red Baron?
Okay, if they can fly around and have dogfights in the sky.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Daniel. Okay, I'm going to show you my thinking here. Okay, I had two ideas. Number one, we have a Western setting with aphids as the cattle that need to be rustled by cowboys, right? That was one idea. That's really fun. I also had 1920s like pulp action heroes with dragonflies as prop planes, as like prop plane stand-ins.
So I'm for either of those.
Why not both?
Yes, porque no los dos, of course. But like, yes, I'm so glad that you hit me with Star Fox. Like, bam, that's where I'm coming in. We're gonna play around with some like dogfighting nonsense, and I'm super down with that. Before we get fully into that idea, Daniel, explain to me what kind of spirit you want to get out of Star Fox.
One of the things I loved about Star Fox was there was a sense of camaraderie with your fellow pilots. And I'm talking about the N64 one. That's the one that we played. Like you were on a team.
Star Fox 64 is the best one.
It's the best one.
Yes.
Like you're on a team and you're united and you want to save your teammates when they go down. Although that doesn't really express by the mechanics very much. You hate Falco because he's a dick. And there's a central villain who's just unquestionably bad that you're trying to take down. So there's a sense of like you're saving your community, your civilization, and you're fighting for something good. And that I like the straightforwardness of it. And there's also like, a sense of epic scale sometimes. Like remember the one level where there's like a giant Independence Day spaceship that you fight and you can like, you just get this open battlefield to like fly around. It was really cool. And always the NPCs are always talking to you and trying to like goad you on, to make you keep going.
The giant walking fortress is probably one of my favorite stages in that game, just because it's like, I love giant, like, I just love the concept of a giant walking Maginot Line, like that's so cool to me. And like the fact that you get to have this like bombing run type situation, like, I don't know. I'm right there with you, Daniel. I think that's a really cool idea. Courtney, I don't think that you were necessarily like a Nintendo 64 like Star Fox player, right?
No, I did have an N64, but I didn't have Star Fox. I think I like got it from like Blockbuster or something at some point. But I only tried it out a little bit and had no idea what I was doing. So I don't really remember too much about it.
A gentle reminder to all of our listeners that we are old and used to go to Blockbuster all the time. All right. So Daniel, what I'm basically hearing from you is we want something that has like a team of members, like you're involved in that way. You want a unifying villain that is demonstrably evil, correct?
I mean, we don't have to have the villain part, but I like the team part. And especially since you mentioned like, you said 1920s or like Wild West, like this first one makes me think of like, what's his name? the Rocketeer kind of characterization.
Yeah.
I could see a bug person. Or recently in The Mandalorian, we had Cad Bane, I think, who, in a Western kind of look and feel, which I thought was neat too, even though I didn't really care for that entire Book of Boba Fett. That's a different story. But I mean, like, I like that aesthetic. I thought that made sense.
Yes. So some more like aesthetic choices that I'm thinking of. You have something like the Phantom. You have the Shadow.
I love the Shadow. Man, that's so long ago.
Yeah, not the 90s movies, because those are both bad. But
I fucking love the Shadow movie.
Okay, that's
with Alec Baldwin, I think.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
That one's okay. It's bad, but it's not terrible. The Rocketeer is an excellent choice, Daniel. Like,
I love for that. Or Sky Captain of the World of Tomorrow, one of my favorite
That's the
movies.
Next one I was going to say.
Yes.
Exactly. Which is super, super underrated. Like,
it is.
I'm pretty sure it tanked.
You're literally the only person who has ever said that to me, and I am so grateful.
It's because it's a fantastic movie. It's super underrated. Yeah.
It's got everything. Dinosaurs, Nazis, robots. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the aesthetic is cool too. Like,
the sepia tone thing that I don't know what they were doing was neat.
Yes. Very underrated movie.
Giant robots? Did I mention giant robots? It had giant robots.
And of course, because I think this is a great distillation of the 1920s pulp vibe that I'm looking for here, the absolute masterpiece that is the 1999 Brendan Fraser classic of The Mummy.
Of course.
Because again, with that, like, I want to focus on like adventure and like, you know, you're like jumping out of a prop plane and punching out a bad guy, you know, like that's the kind of vibe that I'm really interested in, is like pulpy, fun adventure. Like you're basically doing dives into tombs and meddling with things that you don't need. Or, I mean, we can do like the kind of detective stuff too, if we want to focus on cities. But I think that for me, the thing that I'm really interested in evoking that pulpy spirit is the adventure. That's what I'm interested in. And I think that so far, all of that blends really well with what we have going.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, if you guys are down to go with like the sort of theme of regrowth, like thinking about going on adventures to find like seed vaults and like stuff to kind of replant the world and refresh it, make it green again.
That's really cool. Yeah.
I think that'd be awesome.
I think that's a really great idea as well, as this, you know, Arctic expedition to the seed vault, you know, or I mean, it's Antarctic, but still it's basically like El Dorado, right?
I think it is Arctic actually.
Okay. Well, it's one of the two.
But one of the two. Yeah.
It's
but
a place,
I know what you mean.
A place where it is cold.
Yes.
So for me to get a sense of where I know we haven't done all the tenants, right? We still have one for Courtney, or no?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to ask some questions about what we've established so far. So we've got the setting. It appears to be somewhat in the future because humans have undergone some sort of self-caused disaster. The world is recovering, and the bugs have evolved as a result of that disaster. That's the case so far.
I would agree with everything that you've said so far. Yes.
Okay.
And when we say bugs, right, I think that the aesthetic that I have in mind is more like Hollow Knight or Bug Fables.
Yeah.
Let me Google those.
Hollow Knight's super cute. I love the art style.
Yeah, you should look at Bug Fables as well.
Yeah.
One of our patrons he was the one who recommended it to me. So shout out to Jay for recommending Bug Fables, which has a great aesthetic and a very cool world building. I haven't gotten a chance to play it yet.
So this has been 1920s, basically.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Exactly. Also, another thing that I kind of have in mind as well is another Discord member who goes by Moth and has like a bunch of art, which I think is kind of like appropriate for what I'm thinking of when I think of moths and other insectoid creatures and stuff like that. So also shout out to Moth. Go check out Moth's Twitter because there's a bunch of cool art on it. So with enough of the shilling of our community out of the way, like, what was your last tenant, Courtney? Was it a focus on regrowth? Was that your tenant, or did you have something else?
No, actually I had something else.
Hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah. So this ties in really well with camaraderie and adventure, but Monster Hunter style takedowns of major predators.
Yes, I can support that.
Yeah.
Can we also throw in the aerial aspect and throw in an AT-AT Walker scene from Star Wars And so it's like you're flying around on your biplane, which is basically a dragonfly, and then you have like the hooks that come out and you like topple over a cat or topple over like some like feral monster or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think there are a lot of opportunities there for like crazy combat scenes.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. Okay, this is setting I'm really getting into. I'm like, oh, this is so fun already. This is gonna be a gas, you know. So all of our tenants are out of the way. That's excellent. But we have to ask, because there's one thing that we haven't really satisfied yet, right? Which is aphids must play a large role in the setting. How do we think we want to do that within the setting that we've established so far?
I think we have to interpret aphid to mean something not so literal. And I have a feeling, given that the world is trying to be renewed, perhaps there's creatures that are either farmed or nurtured to carry perhaps the salvation of the world. And I don't know what those are. Like, I don't want to think literal cows, but maybe there's like some kind of creature that's like an aphid that has the same purpose. Because an aphid in an ant colony provides the milk to creatures like the queen. And so they keep it alive.
Well, Daniel, I'm so glad you would suggest that they might be cows, because like I said already, they would take the place of cattle in like a cowboy type story, right?
Yeah.
However, I mean, why can't we have like rustling, where you have to take aphids from plant life to plant life, and like you're essentially they're a way of maintaining civilized areas through the aphids. You know, basically, it's like, oh, we herd these animals so they can not only dine and feast on the plant life, but also they can bring it back and then nourish the colony as well, you know?
Yeah. Like, I'm happy having literal aphids as cattle.
as am I. Yeah.
It would be nice if they in some way are related to the human disaster. And that by that I mean, like, it would be nice if the way that the world can be restored, something from that disaster is used, and maybe the aphids are the bridge between those two things. So I mean, maybe there is something that they keep inside of them, or that they ingest, or I don't know what, that is being used by civilization to kind of bring things back to life. Because otherwise we have the humans just in this gated realm where they don't really serve a purpose just yet.
I think they're more like a background kind of threat, but I think you're right in that sense that they're not necessarily cohabitating with us or with the bugs. You know what I mean?
I mean, maybe these creatures are partly from that space or engineered from the past or something. I don't know, but I feel like they must carry something from the past that helps the future for it to work narratively, maybe.
So maybe what we're looking at is the humans have opened up some kind of portal that unwittingly they let these aphids come in, and they were so small that the humans didn't necessarily see them at first. And so but the insects did, and they start like eating the aphids or eating the aphid milk. And that's where their sentience comes from, is once they start ingesting
their milk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And maybe that whatever those things were in the past, like, were either a cause of a problem or in some way helpful, but it helped evolve the bugs. And so now the aphids themselves are huge too.
I mean, it could even have been like a laboratory experiment, and when the apocalypse kind of set in, as things kind of broke down, the aphids eventually wandered out, and that's how they kind of came out into the world, and then their milk gave the bugs sentience.
They can change their dimensionality, like, so they can, if the humans are kind of shunted to being higher dimensional, it seems these aphids can shift their dimensionality. That's how they leave that space or appear in regular space.
I think that there might be something to the idea of, you know, by having the aphid like cattle drives as well, you're not necessarily bringing life to civilization. You're bringing sentience to civilization.
Yeah.
You know, you're literally spreading this intelligent thought, this sentience to other bugs by being like, yo, have this aphid milk. And that's how it kind of spreads. It's almost like a religion, but like of reason and sentience instead of like faith in a way.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that. I think we can work on that, you know, as we go forward. I just wanted to make sure that there was some connection so we could bridge the two of them.
Totally. No. I appreciate that. I'm glad that someone's looking out.
But I love the idea of these little bugs like coming over and then eventually growing the civilization essentially, which is
yeah. And another way to tie in the humans a bit more with what we've got going on is like, since we want like a sense of adventure and stuff, like what if bugs are able to kind of use them as transport, but because of how completely like unreliable and unknown it is, like you don't really know where you're going to end up if you jump on a human.
Oh, that's horrifying.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's like horrifying, but it's also like I don't know, it could be
fun.
An interesting like a fun way to like explore different areas, and like then you have to make your way back to where you came from.
I mean, and you can interpret that too as if they have fighter pilot planes, like they might ride the quote unquote human wave to other regions of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, and are they tiny things, or are they actually human sized now? Like, because even if they're normal human size, the bugs, like humans in the other space could still be perceived as gigantic because of the way they move.
Oh no, I was picturing the bugs as like still like little bug sized.
Yes,
still small. Okay,
as was I. Yeah, what I'm picturing here, like, so what I'm hearing, right, is that these humans are kind of moving. They're essentially like teleporting at random places, not just in our own dimension, but also like maybe across the planet in some way. So you could have like a group of bug adventurers who are like, we're gonna go and try and find El Dorado, and it's basically like Sliders, but within the same planet, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Where they hop on a human and they're like, okay, and then they blink out and they blink back and they're somewhere else in the world. And then that can definitely lead to the adventure that I'm thinking of when I'm thinking of like 1920s, like pulp adventures and stuff like that. That's like a Doc Savage or something along those lines, where it's not just about, the detective stories or the war stories. It's also about exploring parts of the world that are essentially unknown.
Exactly.
But I guess my question, if we were to kind of go on that angle, is what would the purpose of them be besides exploration? Or are they like directly trying to bring sentience to the entire world?
The humans or this group?
No, the bugs.
The explorers.
The bugs. Yeah, the explorer bugs. Yeah.
I mean, I would have to think maybe like, is only a section of bug population sentient in this way? Are there still bug animals? Or are they all sentient?
I'd like to think that there's a mix. I think that there's certainly bugs that are essentially used as a stock animal or as vehicles, so we can kind of have a Flintstones vibe in that way. But I also think that there are definitely maybe this concoction increases intelligence, and it depends on the species of insect how drastically that is affected. So maybe something like insects or scarabs are particularly affected, and so they're remarkably intelligent, whereas dragonflies are only as intelligent as, say, like a big dog or like a particularly smart dog or something like that.
Well, so then to answer your question, I almost feel like we don't necessarily have to make it the mission of them has to be something related to the sentience giving milk. Like maybe this happened over generations, I'm assuming, the bugs gaining sentience, the ones that did. And they now revere these aphids as sacred cows in some way. But I think whatever they're doing, hitchhiking on higher dimensional humans, might be totally unrelated. It might be part of their own personal goals as a society.
So it's more of like a Mount Everest or a straight up explorer thing, where it's like, we know the known world, now we need to master the unknown world, that kind of thing.
Yeah, or whatever we build the adventure to be. Like, it could be that, it could be something unrelated, because in Star Fox, they're trying to free Lilat from
Andros.
Andros, right? He's an oppressor. But they're sentient animals in spaceships, so they're two separate things.
Can we but can we get a cool main villain? I feel like we should probably peg down some kind of villainous force within the world.
I think I have an idea.
Oh lord, what do you got, Courtney?
All right, so we're talking about the humans having this weird like multi-dimensional property of some sort. Then I was thinking, like, would blood-sucking insects be able to absorb that by drinking their blood? So what if we had a mosquito villain who has made a habit of drinking the blood of these multi-dimensional humans, and that way, like, this villain is able to kind of jump around too.
Oh, and that means that these mosquitoes, if they want to be able to feed on humans, they probably use the aphids in some way, because the aphids are multidimensional.
They're vampires too. I'm tossing that out right now. Yeah. They're vampires. We were talking about this in our regular RPG night recently, that I think that the blood-sucking like animals of the real world don't get enough play as vampire minions. So like leeches or mosquitoes, like they don't see enough, like they should be vampire monsters is what I'm suggesting. And I'm going to be doing that here. Whenever you talk about a villainous mosquito force, I'm going to assume that every single one of them sounds like Bela Lugosi in the 1930s Dracula.
Of course.
That's my headcanon. You don't have to think that way, but that's how I'm going to hear it every time you talk about them. So that's where my brain is. And Daniel, I love that idea a lot. The idea that it's not just, well, can we have it be mosquitoes and ticks as well?
Yeah,
sure.
Just go super gross with it.
There's like factions of them then, you know. But the mosquitoes have gathered amongst themselves, all the bloodsuckers.
It's the blood-sucking alliance. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think what we would do is we would call them something cooler, like the Sanguine Order or something like that. You know, that's what they would call themselves.
I could see them tapping aphids to gain the special milk to increase their cerebral power, so they can shift into the realm where the humans are, suck their blood, they come back with their powers. Yes. Their enhanced sentience.
Yeah, I can see that. Might not be appropriate, might not be thematically or time period appropriate. They could just be stand-ins for Nazis if we really wanted to make them unapologetically evil. Like, we could go that direction, and I'm totally cool with that, because I'm thinking Indiana Jones as well. Like the primary villain are often Nazis in those movies, and I love that type of thing. So we could have bug Nazis. I'm just saying, if you guys wanted to go that direction, yeah.
We have had a lot of Nazi-related things in recent prompts.
Have we?
I mean, I feel like they keep coming up. They keep getting referenced.
We had Lady Hitler.
Oh, we did. Yeah, we did have Lady Hitler. But besides Lady Hitler, did we have anything besides that?
I remember talking about them again in another one. Maybe I'm not. I don't know.
Courtney, I'm going to tell you why we have to have bug Nazis, because you're missing out on one of the greatest possible villain names of the Red Baron. I mean, like, come on. Like, I know that's not Nazi, that's World War I technically, but like the idea that we can have a villain who is the Red Baron, he's just a mosquito who flies around and is also a really competent pilot. Like, come on, that's so good, and we could have it, and you don't want to deny that to us, right?
Of course not. Of course not.
Of course. You would not deprive the viewers, the listeners, of something as fun and as dumb as that.
Never.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I love everything that we're doing with this so far. Do we have any details that we really need to nail down right now?
No, but I did just think of the that scene from the What We Do in the Shadows TV show where they drink the blood of people who had taken drugs, and the vampires then got like super high from it. Yeah.
If allowed, we could spend the next part and a half just talking about What We Do in the Shadows. So love it. Love that idea. How can we incorporate it into the setting? Or do we just want to skip ahead and like skip the 45-minute conversation about that brilliant show / movie?
I mean, we could have some like kind of incompetent, shitty mosquitoes and ticks.
Yeah, I kind of like that.
They kind of been like booted out of like the serious faction, and they're just on their own, like dicking around doing.
They're bartenders.
Well, you could also you could make the quote unquote Nazi bug faction like over the top ridiculous, like
yes,
cartoonish,
absolutely.
Right? So perhaps the drinking of the higher dimensional human blood really makes them wacky, like in a Iron Sky sort of way.
In my head, when you look at them, you will know that they are evil just based on how they look.
Right.
You know, it's like you look at them like, that's a bad guy. That is absolutely a villain, 100%. There's no, it's like unambiguous. Yeah.
Like they're Looney Tunes evil, you know.
And I think the other kind of idea that I have in mind is like, you can have a villainous force that is essentially infinite and like, yes, is technically a terrifying threat, but to the heroes, they don't need to seem that way. Like, there's going to be like maybe 2 or 3 competent ones that are an actual threat, you know, but like in terms of what you see them do in terms of evil, we don't necessarily need to explore that. We don't necessarily need to see the consequences of these villainous actions. You know, I think that if we remove that and just focus on the wackiness and like the cannon fodder aspect of it, I think that's a more fun way that we can kind of keep this involved, you know?
Yeah, I think we can keep it lighthearted, especially since I picture the mosquitoes and ticks and stuff more so going after like humans and other larger animals, not so much other bugs.
I think that might be a fun thing that we can focus on is what are the things that the sanguine order and the good bug folk are both after? What do they both want and what do they kind of race against each other to get? I imagine sometimes it's humans, but I think that there's something else that we might be able to install here that we can add an additional like plot hook or series of plot hooks by giving it more MacGuffins or something like that, you know?
I mean, what's at stake for bug civilization in general?
It's a good question.
Like it seems right now the villain has far more motivation. Like if anything, if I'm of those bugs, the bad blood sucking ones, like not only am I trying to increase my sentience, but I'm also like gaining the ability to really teleport all over the place if I'm temporarily extracting their power, you know, the humans.
Mad scientist bugs. I just want to point that out that we have mad scientists right here because they're gaining sentience. They're super brilliant, of course. Yeah, I just want to point that out that we can have mad scientist bugs, and that's really fun and cute, and I like that.
Then I assume they're experimenting on aphids to get the milk so they can...
Not just aphids, I would imagine. It has to be like a myriad of bugs.
Well, I'm sure, but that's where the milk comes. It lets them transfer themselves.
Yes, yeah.
I could even see them, like, the mosquitoes, I don't know if it really can work this way, but like flying to a human, sucking up a bunch of blood, then flying to another animal and like injecting the blood to see what happens. Like not necessarily bugs, but like mice or rats or whatever.
I
don't know.
There's something here. There's something that we're like tantalizingly close to that I feel like we're like really, we just need like a pinky finger. We're like a scrape away. You know what I mean?
One possibility, going back to exploring strange unknown places, you know, you could have them in a race to find something that's in an unknown place, like in the Antarctic or in upper New England, because that would be the Antarctic for bug people who are tiny. You know, some lost civilization or some unknown vista where they both have something they can retrieve that's very valuable to them. Then you can have the adventure stakes.
Yeah, I mean, we had brought up the seed vault before and the idea of like regrowth and like repopulating the earth with plants and stuff, so could be related to that. And maybe it doesn't even need to be like the seed vault over in the Arctic. It could be like a gardening store, like something
which is their seed vault.
Yeah,
that'd
it's
be
like
fun.
It's very like mundane to us, but to them it's this like vast like Eden type thing.
Oh, okay, I got it. Just when you said that. It's an Ace hardware that has not been phase shifted into the other reality, and it contains piles and piles of bags of these seeds that if they collect, they could reseed their home. But the evil bugs have some other intentions for it.
I love that idea. We can expand it to not just be like a singular Ace hardware, but like multiple. So maybe we could potentially see it as there are many seed vault like areas, or they're basically robust forests or rainforests or something like that. So when they're having these grand adventures, they're actually just in the outdoor like gardening section of Home Depot, like,
yeah.
but perspective shift, of course, it's going to look a little bit different. The other idea that I might want, and it might tie a lot of things together here, is I think Daniel's right. I think that there is kind of like a lack in motivation for the good bugs, right? And I think that if we make it so they're both after the same resource and have that resource be the aphids themselves, that might be a really fun way that we can tie everything together. So you have the good bugs and the bad bugs. They attach onto these humans, pop out, and try and find as many aphids as possible, and then rustle them back to their dimension or area. And that would explain why the exploration is necessary and why plane hopping or planet hopping on the humans is necessary as well. They're trying to gather more of these aphids because that's where they come from.
Perhaps the aphids instinctually are returning to some particular point, and so that's why everyone's in a race to get to them.
What do you mean, point?
So, like, right now, we know some of the aphids are distributed among the good bugs, and they're otherwise in the world. But what if they all suddenly, for some instinctual reason, are returning to a particular place, which could be a place of crossover between the human realm and this one?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what you're saying, Rob, like that you're pursuing them. It's a race to get them all because now they're all going to be in one place.
Yeah, I'm kind of seeing them as like an analogy for a resource, like oil, but instead of something that you have to mine for, or something that you have to drill for, it's a living, not sentient, but it's a living being that you have to rustle and guide back to civilization. You're still milking it for its its resource, but I imagine that the more you grow, the more that your civilization grows, you're going to need more of this resource, right? It's not just about food, it's also about gaining sentience, maintain and whatnot,
Maybe maybe the aphids are like some sort of key to getting the plant life to grow again. Whether it's like what they do as aphids or if it's their milk that's particularly like nutrient rich that can be used to like fertilize the plants or whatever.
Well, I'm concerned that we're making the aphids a little bit too important in that case, because that it's not just about the sentience, that it's also about, plant life as well. I feel like maybe what we do is we have two resources that are vital: the aphids, which provide sentience, and then this other thing that provides the regrowth that you're suggesting here, Courtney, like the improved growth, I suppose.
Well, it would seem that the bugs having sentience is what can restore the world in general, because now they're able to farm and shape the world. That's what humans do, is we change the world for ourselves. So maybe the regrowth of the world has to do with the fact that the bugs have sentience. But then I guess the question is, if you subtract the bugs now, do you even need them? Like, why do we need them still?
Which bugs?
The aphids. If we already have sentience, why do we need to have the aphids around anymore?
Because it's a resource that you have to continue. Like, the way that I'm looking at it is, it's not as though you drink the aphid milk once and you maintain that sentience. I'm thinking that it could potentially lead to a Flowers for Algernon thing where you're granted sentience and you have to maintain this diet of aphid milk in order to have expanded knowledge, right? And you could do a couple of things with this that might be rather interesting. One, the evil faction could be really greedy and hoards a lot of that. It's basically like the Emperor from Warhammer 40K, where it's like one person, because he's a mad genius, because he's super intelligent, he hoards a lot more of the sentient juice than his minions, which also means that, that there's canonical reason for why minions are so dumb in the evil empire, right?
Wouldn't that be rather dark? Because now we have the possibility that people will develop Alzheimer's if they don't eat the sentient milk.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's more they go feral, right? Like they revert.
It's just scary.
Yeah, I am cautious of like going in that direction just because it can get super dark. Like Flowers for Algernon is fucking sad as hell. Like,
right. Valid point. It can go super dark, but I think that's why we have heroes, and that's why the stakes here would matter,
I'm just wondering if, but the reason why I asked the question is because it seems that the aphid served a purpose initially, right?
Right.
And if we don't want their very sentience to be dependent on consuming this resource, then what value do the aphids have if they're not if that's not the reason why they're there?
So it's sort of a compromise. What if like the bugs are currently working on a way to make it permanent, but they haven't quite gotten there yet?
Oh, that's fun.
Sentience. Yeah.
There's also the idea that we could only be talking about a certain subsection of insects right now. It's not like the entire world, but maybe just, one McDonald's parking lot that has gained sentience because of the randomness of the aphid milk and the humans who are, interdimensional.
I guess I'm not sold on the idea of them possibly losing their sentience, because that just seems very, very dark for a setting that's supposed to be about happy bugs.
Yeah.
And then two, the subsection of bugs that may rely on it, it seems to make it more complicated than it needs to be. So I'm wondering, like, do we revise the idea of sentience giving, or do we like make it that maybe the bugs are gone now, they haven't been around for a long time, and so we're trying to find them for some reason? I just worry about, like, when I'm looking at the 2 video games you sent me, like, if I imagine those poor little bugs, if they don't get their sentience coconut, they're going to become feral monsters. Like, I just think that runs counter to our theme.
I mean, I think I feel like we can like kind of simplify it and say like, I'm not entirely sure then like if the aphids would even have had to relate to the sentience then, if maybe they're just literally like a form of cattle, of livestock that helps the bugs survive in this sort of broken world. So that kind of would get rid of the risk of them losing their minds eventually.
Yeah, I see your points, and I'm willing to jettison the idea that, you need to continue to drink this concoction in order for you to maintain sentience. I'm willing to get rid of that idea. I'm feeling like it's a matter of you drink it once and you're good for the rest of your bug life. But again, it's a matter of you have this magical, wonderful thing, which is this sentience providing elixir. Wouldn't you then want to give that to other sentient beings? Wouldn't you want to create that? Or is that something that maybe this is perhaps a little dark, is what we're getting into, is the idea of, if you have the ability to provide sentience, what is your moral obligation to do so? And as soon as I say that, that is too heavy for what I want to talk about here. So,
I mean, my impression was that at some point in the distant past, bugs consumed this milk and became sentient, and now they have a civilization. But then it's like you now remove the value of them in the present, right?
So aphids, we remove the value of the aphids in the present. Yeah.
So what if we try, as an experiment, what if we try something else? Like the aphids we know come from this other place, and they carry something from another place. What if they're a means of travel? Like, I mean, we've done that before, but I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what else to give them.
I mean, do they need to be like they could just be like sort of almost like God type things, like like you had said before, sacred cows, like, and maybe they are even giant because of whatever was done to them or the post-apocalypse or whatever. But basically, like, maybe each settlement has their own like group of aphids that they sort of feed and take care of and drink the milk
because
as a resource. But but it's sort of like a, looking to them as like a source of comfort almost, rather than like a like necessary to survive kind of thing.
It's like our Cheshire cats from the other setting, basically.
Well, the chunky beef cats were a lot more important there because they played a demonstrable, like, they had like impact on the world itself. Whereas I think I kind of agree with what Courtney's saying, is that these things were vitally important to the emerging sentience of the bug nations. But then after that, it's like, they kind of don't do anything, but we're still going to treat them with respect because we understand what they have provided. And then I think you're right, is that we can call them sacred cows, essentially, right? They can be, they're treated with respect. They are a part of bug society, but like maybe that's seen as kind of a conservative or kind of a quaint, old-fashioned way of thinking. And these new modern bugs are like, we don't care about the aphids. Like, they were important to our past, but that's in the past. We're all about the present. we're all about flying those dragonflies, man. You're like, maybe it's something that we have. I feel like we've fulfilled the tenet, which is we've made them important. And I think that we can kind of leave it there. They don't have to be continuously important.
What does the tenet say exactly?
Aphids must play a large role. And I think them providing the sentience, them essentially being the origin story, the kind of inciting incident or the inciting creature, I think that's a very large role. Like, you would not have the setting without the aphids.
Yeah. And I mean, if we wanted to keep them like more relevant in the present too, like I said, they could be part of the settlements. They could almost be like these oracle type figures that people go to for advice if they have their own sentience. Like,
yeah, I like that.
You know, go to them, like give them an offering, and like
they give you
chat
milk.
with them. Yeah, they give you milk, and yeah.
Well, see, it's interesting because I definitely didn't see them as sentient. I saw them more as like more in line with like cattle or something like that. But
yeah, I hadn't before thought of them that way, but now I'm wondering if they're just sort of like these like very slow moving, slow speaking elder type figures.
And the first sentient insects, essentially. Maybe because that goes back to our human situation. Maybe they were insects that were given sentience at whatever happened, and they also can shift planes, and so their children are the bug people, quote unquote children.
Spiritual children, of course.
Yeah, right.
Metaphorical
children. They give them sentience as a gift from themselves.
Right.
But they're still living in both worlds.
I think that we should table this idea because I think that it's taking away from like, I feel like we're really hyper focusing on one very specific aspect here of the aphids, and saying we've got a big wide world of like bug adventures that we could be having. You know what I mean?
Well, the reason why we're doing that though is to figure out the motivations of the bugs. Like, so if now that we've figured out that they're not a driving factor of the plot, we put them in the background while fulfilling the tenet, which is good. Right. So now we can figure out what the motivation of the bugs is because we still haven't done that.
And that's exactly what I was trying to pull us towards. Exactly. Like, let's find that next point of motivation that we can really. So what's important, right? We need resources. That's always the thing that people fight over, right? It's space and resources. So what is the resource that we need here that we're talking about for these new bugs?
So would it be what we talked about with like the quote unquote seed vaults of Ace Hardware and Home Depot?
And that's where the kind of so instead of, we can kind of keep the whole idea of hopping on humans to travel around the world, and instead of bringing back aphids, you can bring back seeds instead, you know?
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And there's obviously correlations with like pollination and bees as well. So there's, there's that kind of thing. So yeah, that works as well, I think.
But it doesn't have to be world ending. Like, maybe that's one of the things that they're at contention about. Like, some of them are trying to get seeds. Maybe the evil bugs are like, oh, let's take this bug killer and spray it on everyone because we're bad.
Ooh, that's really store. Daniel, that's an excellent idea. Oh man, you just changed the
bug
game.
Genocide. Yeah, but we can't. That's dark. But you know what I mean? Like, they could be multiple things that they're after in different scenarios and adventures.
I'm now just thinking of like, what's the equivalent of the Tomb of Horrors in Bug World? It's probably a place that has like glue traps everywhere or something like that. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's good. I like that. Maybe it's a way of also introducing the post-apocalyptic angle by the insects are also like, what can we find from the old world that we can retrofit and use to provide our society with something better, you know?
Right.
Well, I think where we are is a really great place. I think that combing through the depths of the post-apocalypse for some way to advance bug civilization for better or for ill is a great place where we can stop and kind of reassess our tenets before we move into rolling for the twist. How's that sound to you?
Works for me.
Excellent. So let's start us off. Courtney, you start us off with your tenet. What was your first tenet? Remind us.
That I wanted humans to be like directly inhabiting where the bugs were, not just sort of occasional visitors or having some sort of like direct interaction, basically.
Right. And do you feel like we've really nailed that down, or do you think that they've kind of faded into the background a little bit more than they should?
I do think that they've faded a bit. I think we could bring them back just by like probably bringing them in more next time when we talk about the twist and stuff. But like having them be a more regular presence. Like maybe there are humans, still wandering around the Home Depots and Ace Hardwares of the world, and maybe there are still humans like trying to survive out there, leaving crumbs around for these bugs,
or maybe even recognizing their sentience.
Maybe, yeah.
That might be kind of interesting, is that there could be bug alliances with humans, even if they're temporary.
Or tiny humans.
Tiny humans? I don't know how I feel about Honey, I Shrunk the Humans here. I don't know about that.
I think
I'm going to bring a faction of tiny humans, so fuck both of you guguys.
Damn it, Daniel.
Daniel, you're more than welcome to. I can't wait to roll the twist, which is anime, frankly.
I mean, it could be interesting if like you have let's say like a wandering family of humans in this post-apocalyptic world, and
trying to survive.
Like, and like their youngest like daughter or something decides to like make an ant farm, and then realizes after a little while like, oh, these ants are like way more organized and together and with it than they should be, and like she's the one who realizes like, wait, these bugs are like actually like thinking now.
Isn't this a Star Trek episode? I feel like this is a Star Trek episode premise for sure, right?
What I like about that though is it would also reveal to the bugs what the humans really are, and if there's an adventuring group that discovers this, that would be a really interesting storyline.
Cool. Okay, I think that's a good way that we can kind of square your tenet, Courtney, right?
Yeah.
Daniel, what was your first tenet?
That the bugs are on a lower plane of dimensional existence than the humans.
And I feel like we've kind of nailed that, right? Yeah. Okay. My first tenet was tied into yours, and I can't even remember what it was now. Oh, post-apocalypse. We've definitely incorporated that for sure. Courtney, your second tenet.
Mine was the Monster Hunter style takedowns of big creatures. So
we haven't done that yet.
Well, I mean, we've got like the adventuring vibe, and we've got like Dragonfly airplanes and stuff like that. I guess we didn't like definitively talk about things, but I could definitely see like a group trying to take down some like evil rat kind of thing or things like that.
Let's give that a little bit more love then, right? Can we say that when the bugs take down these monsters, they're also like trying to domesticate or use them in some way? So it's not just that you're taking them down to like kill them or get them out of your area, but it's also like maybe you can use some more docile creatures as like a really big walking fortress, or like some kind of a domesticated animal of some kind, like you're not going to tame a cat, but you could potentially make another type of animal, serve a purpose in bug society.
Yeah, like mice or rats that are pulling carriages, or like building stuff.
Moles that are just big tunnel diggers or something like that.
Building stuff on the backs of turtles. That could be fun.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way that we can kind of incorporate that in, like really expand on it. And again, because you have the evil faction, like you can definitely have like the animal usage be kind of a stark delineation between which faction is which, you know what I mean?
Oh, so turtles are basically aircraft carriers, I think.
well, no, they're you're absolutely right. Yeah, you're 100% right.
I guess amphibious aircraft carriers, because they could, be on the land and then go into a lake and have dragonflies land on them. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's good. I think that's really fun. Yeah. Daniel, how do you feel about that?
Oh, I think that's a good opportunity to make a faction with that, Yeah. To explore it further.
Yeah, animal tamers, like an entire faction that just does that. Yeah, that's another layer and another dimension. Speaking of dimensions, what was your second tenet, Daniel?
That there are starfighters, which we have, fighter pilots.
Absolutely, and I think that fed into mine, which was I really wanted to evoke the spirit of 1920s and 30s like pulp stories, and I feel like we've done a good job in doing that as well.
Yeah, we can like expand on it with the settings as well, or the factions.
I think you're absolutely right. I think we're going to see a lot of that like subgenre and theme really get played out a lot more in the factions that we're going to come up with next time. Yeah, absolutely. So like last series, we're going to do what we did again, which is we're going to roll the twist, and then we're going to incorporate that into the world building anchor that we build. So we're going to roll some dice and see what the twist for this world is going to be. And it is... Okay, so the twist is, now make it strange. No, stranger than that. I think we're already kind of in strange territory, so I'm real curious as to what we do with that. I mean, I have ideas. I'm going to shut up before we continue on, but I think that's going to do it for this episode of World Build with Us. Remember that if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com. You can follow us on Twitter over at Let's World Build. You can come join our Discord and chat bugs and interdimensional beings with a link for that in the description. Or if you're feeling particularly generous or just want our sweet, sweet patron-only episodes, you can go to our Patreon and give us money with a link for that. You can also find it, Ben, you already know, in the description of this episode. That will do it for this episode of World Build with Us. Remember that we love you very much. We're going to get through this together. Until next week.